For a lot of people who may not know who you are, Russell Morris, because we have lots of people listening outside of this country, and I know you hate the word iconic, but you are an iconic Australian performer. You've been around since the year dot, and you just keep getting better and better every single year. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think I started just after the dinosaurs.
Tell us a little bit about how did you get started?
I wanted to, I was doing my, a diploma of economics and accountancy and law, and some friends formed a band, and I used to go and watch them rehearse, and their singer got poached by someone else, and they said, do you want to sing with us? Just for the Christmas holidays. So I joined them and sang with for the Christmas holidays, and that was it. I never went back and finished my diploma.
Wow. Your parents must have been pretty upset.
No, they were fantastic. That's the great part about my parents. I'm the Gaylord Fokker of the music business.
What does that mean?
Well, when I was a young kid, that movie Meet the Fockers, I would endeavour to get into every single team, and I was always the last picked. I was that kid. Pick me, and I was the last one standing. And by default, I'd had to go to one of the other teams. And my parents my grandmother and my mother revelled in any minor success I had. Like if I came third in the egg and spoon race, and happened to get a ribbon, they would pin it on the fridge, and everyone that came round, they would show them. And say, look, Russell did, look, and they were so. And so I knew in my heart of hearts that I was a failure, but it didn't matter because they just embraced everything I did, whether I failed or anything, as long as I tried. And that sort of got into my nature, I think. And that's how I started doing what I was doing. And I have fear of attempting things, but because of my earlier upbringing, I don't have fear of failure. I have fear of messing it up, but I don't feel that I'm going to fail. So I always give it my best shot, whether I make it or not. Like for that reason, I'm a rotten golfer. I'm a terrible tennis player. That's awful.
Yeah, but Russell Morris, you're only talking about sport. I mean, from your early years, it was sport that you weren't picked on teams for. That doesn't say anything about you academically, because if you were studying all those things at university, you were obviously very competent.
The reason I got through school is because I was a legacy boy. My father died after the war, like when I was 2 years old. So legacy really helped push me through. I was considered, I remember doing maths at one stage, or doing algebra. This was in high school. And as soon as the teacher, I think it was Mr. Ian Pace, he would turn to the class and he'd say, any questions, Morris? And he would come over and I said, I don't understand, sir. I just don't understand. And all the class would laugh at me. And I swear I did not understand. I could not follow algebra. So he would explain it all to me. The exams came up and I didn't know what I was doing, and I got 84. And he absolutely turned on me because he thought I'd been making a fool of him for the whole year. Right. So I wasn't very good academically either, because I couldn't concentrate for more than 10 minutes. And the only reason I passed my exams is because legacy pushed me through. And then I ended up going to a higher education. I went to Swinburne. And when I got there, I started the science course and realised it was beyond me. And after 6 months, moved to commerce and accountancy. And they said, you'll never pass. You'll never pass. Not after 6. You can't catch up. But I had such great mates at school who were still my really good mates. Sat down and said, we'll get you through. We'll get you through. And they tutored me on things. And one of my really dear friends, John Beecroft, was a genius when it came to exams. I remember going for an economics 2 exam once, and he came to visit me. He said, you're going to economics for the exam tomorrow? And I said, next week? And I said, no, I'm not. He said, why not? I said, because I never went to the lectures. I've been playing in the band. He said, you can pass. He said, you've got the basic knowledge of it all. And he said, a lot of it's like first year anyway. I said, John, I don't think I can. He said, listen, I'll predict the paper. So he wrote out and he said, these are the questions I am 100% sure they're going to ask. Everything he said, learn them parrot fashion, which I did. Like 4 weeks later after that, I wouldn't know what the hell they were. I learned everything parrot fashion, and I could précis it down and then expand on it. Out of all the questions on the paper, there was only a 1 10-pointer that he missed predicting. And
Wow.
I ended up with 90 or something.
Wow.
I had no idea what I was writing about. I just learned everything parrot fashion. I had a pretty good memory then, but only short term. It only lasted for a small amount of time, a small window. Within 3 weeks, it would have gone from my mind.
Yeah.
Still very similar to that, unfortunately, these days. My memory, if I meet someone 2 months ago, even if I have dinner with them and I run into them in the street, I don't tend to recognize them.
Oh, really?
Something. Well, it is embarrassing, and I know Dr. Carl has the same problem.
Right. Well, that's good. You're in good company.
Well, no, he's much smarter than I am, but I have a problem with recognition sometimes, and I don't know why. It's probably my makeup, the way I'm built.
Yeah. And whatever became of John Beecroft?
He's still my best mate.
What does he do? What is it? I mean, if he was so smart, what did he become?
He became one of the controllers at Arinka. He was one of the guys that when people came with new ideas, he would listen to their ideas and say whether the company would back them. He ended up leaving there and he set up a company called Debt Recovery for people who were in trouble with their financials, like credit cards, and that became really successful. Then he retired and he came up to the Gold Coast to help one of his friends who had a ski business that was struggling. And he said, listen, you've got all this wrong. And he set it all up for him. He said, that's the way you do it. 6 months later, he rang up again and said, no, we're back in trouble again. So he came up, fixed it again. And then Bondi said to him, mate, would you like to buy into the business? And John looked at all the financials and said, yeah, I'll buy. Now it was voted the most popular tourist attraction on the Gold Coast.
Wow.
He's that sort of guy. Plus he wheels and deals in shares and property and things. So he's a very smart man.
And Russell, just explain what legacy is.
Legacy is was for children of servicemen who had passed away or had been killed in the war, and they looked after us and they put us through our education. They gave the family some money to help things. And if it hadn't have been for legacy, I don't think I would have gotten through my education. I probably would have finished at 4th form. Right. And legacy really helped me. And I would have continued on and probably become an accountant or an economist and be now in jail, I would say. So the music business became a breath of fresh air, and it really sort of gave me a career, which at the time I took it up, I was only doing it temporarily, just for the fun of playing in a band. So
did you were playing guitar in the band at the time and you were singing?
No, I never played guitar. I just sang. I only learned to play later on so I could learn to write songs.
Did you know you had a voice?
No. We did one show and it was recorded. It was the Battle of the Bands. And it was recorded. Someone recorded on it, and I heard it. And I went to the band. I said, "I'm leaving." And they said, "Why?" And I said, "I heard my voice. I hate it." I said, "It just sounds like I'm singing through my nose all the time." And they said, "No, we like your voice." And I said, and they had to talk me into pulling the plug because I didn't know.
I had to talk you out of pulling the plug.
Sorry,
I had to talk you out of pulling the plug.
Yeah, they had to talk me out of it. Was other people that always encouraged me to do things. And I had confidence to do it because I didn't care about failing, as I said before. Yeah. But if I was confronted with something that I didn't think I was very good at, I'd think, well, I've got to admit this. I'm not that good. But they said, no, we like the way you sing, So I persevered, yeah.
What song did you sing for the Battle of the Bands with the band?
Hush.
Which became your first single, right?
Yeah, and it sounded like this. Na, 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 na. That's what it sounded like, and it flipped me out. I thought, you know what it's like when you first time you hear your own voice, your recorded voice, you go, do I sound like that? So that really got me, really sort of hit me. And I thought, how can I change this if they want me to keep singing? How do I get away from that horrible nasally thing?
And what did you do?
I just tried to concentrate, not singing up there, trying to keep it. because you tend to, when you're on stage, back in those days, there was no such thing as fold back. All the young singers just get driven around on a sedan, on a litter, being carried by people, because when they get up and sing, they have fold back in front of them and they can hear what they're singing. In my day, there was no such thing. There was the speakers pointing out to the audience, which were all screaming and making a hell of a noise, and you had to try and sing in tune. And most of the time you couldn't hear yourself. So you tended to sing like that to try to get the notes through.
Sorry. Sorry, I'm on the tail end of a cold. Thank you. Sorry, just give me that bit again. So you just start from, so you had to sing like that?
Yeah, because there was no such thing as fold back, you couldn't hear yourself. Like young singers now have either got in-ears or they hear themselves and they still have trouble singing. Not all of them, some of the great singers, but some have horrible trouble. But all the people from my era, including the Beatles and people like that, sang without fold back, singing. So we had to learn to sing and not being able to hear ourselves. So it became almost automatic pilot. You had to have an internal pitch that kept you on key. Of course, sometimes you did wander. You know, if you got carried away and you're trying to sing too high, you would drift, especially if you can't hear yourself. That's very difficult.
Yeah, but as you said, the girls were screaming, so nobody could probably hear anyway.
No, that was what made me give up and go overseas, because I remember I was working in Brisbane and we'd had the huge hit of The Real Thing. And
hang on. Before we get,
all right. Well,
let's build up to that. So the band you were with there was called Somebody's Image.
Somebody's Image.
The song was called Hush.
Hush.
How did you actually? What happened after you? Did you put Hush out as a single?
Yes, we put that as a single and did pretty well. We had a single before that called Heat Wave. Then we had Hush, and then we did another single called Hide and Seek.
So you put those out of your own accord, or you had a record deal? We
had a record deal for the first two with W&G, which was a defunct label, and then we signed to EMI.
Okay, well, you were doing very well, weren't you? As boys off the street, as a result of singing with the Battle of the Bands.
Yes, but doing very well as smoke and mirrors in the music business. We were probably earning $20 a week each.
Oh,
after you pay for the roadie and pay for the van and pay for all that sort of stuff. And it was a very hand-to-mouth existence in those days and very primitive.
Right. So you couldn't have been too happy with your existence. You obviously wanted more. I
did. And the turning point came because I'd given up my education, mind you. I only had one more year to go. And I'd turned on it, and I was doing this, and I thought, I'm going to have to go back to college. And we were up in Sydney performing, and our drummer got very sick and he started throwing up. And I said, you've got to go to the hospital. He said, no, I'm all right. And I said, you've got to stop drinking so much. And he said, I haven't had a drink. He said, I didn't drink anything. I don't know what's wrong, you know. So he was really sick. So I said, if you don't go, I'm quitting the band. So he went to hospital. Next minute, they rang us and said, he's not coming home. He's had a brain hemorrhage. We have to operate immediately. So he'd had a brain hemorrhage. And so he went into hospital. And while we were there, our manager was up there. And he was managing Ronnie Burns. And I caught a bus in to see him. And I said, listen, we need some money. We've got to have some money. We're not surviving. Eric's in hospital. We'll have to get a temporary drummer. And we've got to get some money. And they took me out to dinner. And I was a boy from Richmond, the working suburbs of Melbourne. And our meals were usually chops and potatoes or
and some peas.
Yeah, all peas and all that, those very standard meals.
Yeah.
And they took me out to dinner. And I sat down and Ronnie said, what would you like to have? And I said, I don't know. It was an Italian restaurant, which was really, really suave for me. And he said, why don't you have some oysters Kilpatrick? And I said, what's that? And he said, I'll order you half a dozen. And he said, what about lasagna? And I said, I've never had that either. So I had oysters, Kilpatrick, and lasagna. And when I ate them, I thought, for the rest of my life, I will always try every type of food, no matter what it is, because I could not believe how beautiful it was. And then I thought, how come these guys are living like this, and we're living on bananas and yogurt? So the band got another drummer, and he got into my ear after a while, and he said, mate, the band is disintegrating. Two of the guys want to play jazz and the other guy wants to do, he said, you should go solo.
Right.
And
So
what happened?
Ronnie Burns at the time was already an established pop star in Australia.
Oh yeah, he was big. He was a big star. John Farnham, Normie Rowe. There was a couple of others, but they were all pretty well established at that stage. John had Sadie and all that.
Right, and here are you coming up behind them.
Well, I didn't know where I was. I thought I'm under a rock somewhere compared to them, you know. And I remember going to Johnny Young, who had been a big star, and saying, what should I do? I want to join the band. I want to leave the band and I want to go solo. And he virtually patted me on the head and said, mate, when you grow up to be a big pop star like me, he said, I don't think you should. I think you should just stay with the band. And I ignored him, and I ignored that advice and went on alone. And then one day he saw me performing on one of the TV shows, and all the girls were like really enthusiastic. So he approached me after the show and said, I've got some songs you might like to hear. And Ian Meldrum was with me and he played us a couple of songs. We said, yeah, they're nice. We like those, but we're looking for something different. Have you got anything different? He said, no, not really. So I've got this song I wrote as a joke for a band, but it's not a solo artist song. Play it to us. And he played it to us. And it was the real thing. And we went, that's what we want. And he said, you're crazy. He said, that's not a song for a solo artist. And we said, we beg to differ. And he said, all right, well, it should be done like this. And Ian Meldrum said, no, you're banned from the studio. I see it another way. And the total architect of that song was Ian Meldrum, who took it from, as Johnny's version was like pictures of matchstick men, rock and roll all the way through, to something that goes from hurdy-gurdy man to I Am the Walrus to Hey Jude. That was the idea he had in his head, and he achieved it pretty well.
What was he doing at the time? How had you met Ian Meldrum in the first place?
Well, he managed the band Somebody's Image, because the singer that had been poached from their band was playing in their band, which was called The Group, the GROOP, which were a very big band at Anglesey, and they felt sorry for us. So they invited us down to sing one set. And we came down, they didn't pay us, they just wanted us to so they could go drinking for a little bit longer. And we got up, and unbeknownst to them, Anglesey and Torquay were where I used to surf. And I knew virtually everyone there. The hall was packed with lots of my friends. We went on and they went crazy and started cheering. And Ian Meldrum, who was had come down with the group, and he was their roadie, and he'd been asking them over and over again to let him manage them. And they just kept laughing at him and saying, you're not a manager. And he's saying, but I could produce your records. And they just laughed. So he thought, here's this young, raw band. So he approached us and said, can I manage you? Can I produce your records? And can I get you a record deal? And being incredibly naive, today you would go, who are you? We went, yeah, let's do it.
Wow.
He would turn out to be one of the greatest record producers this country has ever had.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, he hosted that national television show Countdown for many, many years.
Many years.
And was responsible for a lot of bands' success as a result of that, wasn't he?
That's right, yes.
Wow, it's really serendipity in play there that brought you two together.
Well, I often believe in that. My theory of life, we're a bucket of marbles, and we're tipped out at the top of the hill. Some hills we're tipped out on. Some people go down the hill too fast. But on the way, your marbles are always going to reach their level. They're always going to get to where they're meant to go. And if you think of the odds of meeting someone like Ian Meldrum in Anglesey, who had never produced a record, never managed a band, or never done anything like resembling PR, that you would say, yes, take my career under your wing. And he would turn out to be an unbelievable record producer, like incredible. And the odds, those odds are incredible, because I reckon I could walk out into the street and pick 15,000 people and not one of them would be able to get anywhere close to what he was. Yeah.
I had no idea he started off as the group's roadie. None whatsoever. Amazing. So Ian Meldrum picks up the song The Real Thing, given to you by Johnny Young, and he turns it into this massive hit.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
Well, it didn't take long to record. Everyone talks about how long it took to record. It didn't. I think the band probably had 6 run-throughs. And when they got to finally the last time, and it had really gelled, the drummer went and started playing double time. The engineer went to push the button to say, okay, guys, thanks, we'll fade it from there. And Ian went, no, let them have some fun. So they just kept playing and playing and playing. And then the drummer just did a fill and threw his sticks down. And Ian rang me probably that night or the next night and said, I've got a brilliant idea. We're going to make the record 6.5 minutes long. I said, Ian, this is my first solo record. I'm trying to get airplay. They're not going to play it. This is Ian's genius. He said, yes, they will. He said, because I'm going to make it like an EP. To all those people out there who don't know what records are, it's a little black flat thing that looks like a pizza. And in the days when I was around, they had things called EPs, and you would have four tracks, 2 on each side. And there was a little, like an almost clear line in the middle where they would swap over with no sound and then go into the next one. He said, I'm going to make it like an EP. And he said that divider there, the radio people can watch it. And when it goes to that divider, they'll know this is the time to fade it. So if they want to play the whole thing, they'll play it. If they don't, they'll fade it there. And it was a genius idea. And we put them out. And what we didn't put it out. The record company wanted to hear it. They lived in Sydney. And they said, this is ridiculous. How long is this going to take? Because, as I said, the band took very little time to record it. My vocals, I think I probably had 4 run-throughs, but then the rest of the time was Ian putting sound effects in the end, and it took forever. It just kept going on and on and on and on and on. The record company decided to come down from Sydney. So they rang and said, all right, we're coming to hear the record. You know, we've spent all this money. We need to know what we've got here. And Ian's going to me, oh, they're going to hate it. They're going to hate it. And I said, no, it's fantastic. They're going to love this. The engineer's saying, don't be stupid, Ian. They're going to love it. They'll absolutely love it. So they ring from Essendon, which was the airport then, and we're on our way. So we're waiting, and Ian's so nervous. He gets drunk. They roll up, and we put it on and play it really loud. And Ian was right. They hated it. They turned on their heel and said, well, we will ring you tomorrow, and left. Went to their hotel and flew back to Sydney and rang back and said, it's the biggest load of rubbish we've ever heard in our lives. We will not release that record. And Ian said, and they said, if the only thing we might do is release it in Melbourne to try and make some of our money back, because Russell's got a following there. So Ian and I got in the car and drove to Sydney and went to all the radio stations, which you could do in those days. Now you get shot if you try and get in the front door. And we'd knock on the door. Who's your program manager? Or Ray Beam? Can we sit and talk to him? You know, like, we've got this record, and played it to him. Would you play that? Man, this is incredible, you know. And we got all of the people up there to sign a petition. So we then gave it to EMI, and EMI reluctantly released it, and it became the biggest thing they'd ever had.
Unbelievable. Because, of course, those days, airplay on AM, there was no FM yet, but your track had to come in between 2 and 3 minutes, didn't it? There was nothing outside of that at all. So it was quite revolutionary. And EMI released it, as you said, it went to #1 instantly everywhere around the country. Yes,
that's right. I think the suits at EMI didn't understand that it was really different enough. And they just didn't, they were used to hearing the normal hits of the day, which were a 3-minute record, which was really sing-songy and quite happy. This was like sounded like some sort of terrible revolution to them, I think.
Mm. How did it change your life? What did it feel like to have a number one, having gone through all of that?
It was a double-edged sword. It was wonderful, but it was also stressful. Like, for instance, my grandmother and mother embraced it over like so much. My grandmother and mother were so proud because for all their lives they've been telling people that I was really good, and everyone knew that I wasn't. And all of a sudden, miracle of miracles come along and I have this big hit record. So I would come home, because I was still living at home, and there'd be like 13 girls sitting on the front fence. So I'd say hello to them and sign some autographs. Then I'd go inside and there'd be 13 girls sitting around the house having cups of tea that my mum and grandmother were making them. And I never got any peace, and it drove me insane. And it was horrifying. And then our number was given out. Some girls got the number and then spread it around and sold it to other girls. And our phone never stopped ringing. And my poor grandmother was constantly running. Oh, it was just horrible. They were the things that were really awful. And the rest of it was fine, you know, but still there wasn't a real lot of money in music business those days. Like, my biggest payday, you'd think people look at musicians back then and think, oh, they must be reeling it in. My biggest payday, I was top of the bill in Sydney, working at the Horton Pavilion, the Rayovac show. And I thought I'd finally made the big time. I got $500 for the show. That was the biggest thing I'd ever got by miles. Usually it was only $50 to $150 a show.
Well, I mean, although money was worth a whole lot more back then.
Yeah, but still $500.
It wasn't big.
No.
No, you're right. I mean, we thought that, you know, if you had a number one hit out there and the girls are hounding you everywhere, that you must be just raking it in. You're buying yourself cars and clothes and houses and everything else. And actually, if that had been in America, that's what you would have been doing, because all of those guys who cracked it there at that same time were rolling in it.
That's right, and much greater volumes of record sales. Like you say you're lucky enough to sell 500,000 albums here. In America, you'd sell 15 million or something.
Yeah. But you did take off and go to America, didn't you? Or did you go to England first?
I went to England first with Paul Dainty, and he was wonderful. I loved him. And we went over there and couldn't get anything happening. I'd recorded with Cat Stevens' band, and we'd done some nice tracks, and a guy called Brian Lane heard about it, and he liked the tracks, and he said, you should go to America. He said, you're someone that should record in America. So I ended up going to America with Brian Lane and recording for Warner Brothers Records. And the record producer there insulted Mo Austin, who was the head of Warner's, and told him to mind his own something business, because Mo had wanted to hear the record. And the guy said, I'll play you the record when I feel like it. So we lost the deal. It was a nightmare.
Just like that.
Just lost the deal, just like that. And all the shelves were, all the tracks were scrapped. Never heard of again.
Which tracks are you talking about? Which ones did you do with Cat Stevens' band?
I did a thing called Let the Music Take Over Your Head. There was Goodbye Mama. I think I redid Sweet Sweet Love Again. I can't even remember all the others.
Because, Russell, you'd had, I mean, we didn't even talk about them, but you actually had 5 Australian top 10 singles during the late 60s and early 70s, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, but never a really successful album. My album, Bloodstone, only went to about 15, I think. And that was, that did reasonably well. But I had a few hits, and so I decided to. Well, Paul Dainty convinced me to try my luck overseas.
Right. So you'd had the single from Bloodstone was Sweet Sweet Love, which we'll have a listen to now. After that, the following year was 1972. You released Wings of an Eagle. That was pretty big too. Meantime, the real thing started climbing the charts in America. Was that around the same time?
Just a little bit earlier than that. Yes, it did. It started to climb the charts, and Ian and I argue over this forever. I wanted to go to America. He wanted to go to England. And because he had all his friends in England, Terry Doran, who was with the Beatles and all those sort of people. And I wanted to go to America. And he convinced me. And then him and I had a falling out. And we didn't talk for about 4 years after that. And everything had been set up for me to go to England. I went to England. It was terrible. And I came back. Then when I had Wings of an Eagle and Sweet, Sweet Love, Paul Dainty convinced me to go back again. But then Brian Lane said, no, you should be in America. And that's when I went to America, and everything we shot ourselves in the foot there.
Well, you didn't have anything to do with that, did you? That was just circumstantial.
Yeah, well, it was circumstantial. And then I ended up being managed by someone who was like going into it. You think you're going into a safe place, and all of a sudden you find you're in a cage with the devil. It was pretty bad. Oh,
that's awful.
Yeah.
And that's when real things started to climb the charts there, because it reached #1 in Chicago and Houston and in New York. I mean, that's no small feat.
Well, why it died, at that stage, the major record companies were trying to stamp out, like they did with the internet, streaming. They should have done a deal initially with all those like Apple, and they wouldn't. They refused to come to the table. So what they tried to do then was they tried to stamp out independent record companies, like little record companies that had a song, and they would go to the big labels and say, will you press them for me? Mm-hmm. So big labels would press the albums and put them out, and they wanted to get rid of them. So they were refusing to press the records. And unfortunately, I was with a label called Diamond, who had obviously raised the ire of the company that was pressing there, and they wouldn't press them. So we couldn't get them out, couldn't get them to distribute them. Because like with a record company, say you run a little record company, you've got a really hot record, and I'm the big wheel that takes all the records that I press that you've given me, and I've got the distribution. I've got all reps everywhere, and I can distribute it right around the country. Yeah. And all of a sudden they go, I'm not distributing it.
Yeah.
You're stuck. You can't get it out. You can't get it to any of the stores. That's what happened with The Real Thing in America.
Oh, how disappointing.
Oh, well, that's, I believe in fate. I believe the marbles have poured out and some of them got caught halfway up the hill. Right. And that was what was meant to happen.
Right. Now, how long did you stay in America?
Nearly 5 years.
And what were you doing there the whole time?
When I couldn't get my green card, I was servicing fire extinguishers. I worked for KISS.
Did you? What did you do with them?
With the KISS Army. I used to do all the mail. So I did that. And I worked for the Los Angeles Examiner, selling subscriptions. So all those things to keep me alive. And
in the hope of what?
Getting a green card so I could actually work and tour. And what happened, my stepfather had a heart attack, and it was time to come home. So I came home.
Right. Another disappointment then, that you hadn't been able to complete your mission.
Well, they happen. They happen.
Did you get your green card?
Yeah, I got the green card, but it's useless. If you stay out of America longer than a year, you can't use it.
You've got to reapply.
I've got it as a souvenir. But it's funny how you, some of the things you do. I remember when I was looking for a record deal over there, I went into the office of this man who completely put me at ease. Just absolutely fantastic guy. And he said, Russell, I know about your career. I know all the things you've recorded. He said, I love your voice. He said, I just want you to play some of the new songs you've got for me. And he said, just sit on the chair. And he said, please don't feel any pressure, because I love you already. So he sat there with his hands on the back of a chair, and I played about 4 songs. And he said, as I said, I think you could make it here. I'd like to sign you. He said, but I don't hear a hit right there for an American. He said, I've got writers here that I would like you to work with, and I'd like them to write you some songs. And the guys came up and played a couple of songs, and I didn't really like them. I said, let me think about it. I went to another record company where the guys were sitting drinking scotch and smoking cigars, and I played 4 songs, and they said, "Love you, boy, we'll sign you." The first guy I sort of signed with, his name was, sorry,
That's
I'm
right.
just, sorry, I'm
Put
having
your,
a moment.
so yeah, we all have those.
Yeah.
It's okay. Take your time. I'll cut this bit out.
Yeah, cut it. Clive Davis.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah.
It was Clive Davis.
Yeah, before Arista became ginormously big.
Wow.
And when I just saw the Whitney Houston documentary,
It's a good one, isn't it?
and the one which the acted one, the guy that played Clive Davis was a dead ringer, same personality, and he said the same things to Whitney. He must have had the same spiel that he said to everyone. And he said to me, "Russell, what's your passion? Musically, what do you want to do? Tell me what you want to do with yourself, where you see yourself." And he was such a beautiful man. And it's come full circle because I just finished a big album with the orchestra in Melbourne and Sydney. And I think it's probably the best one I've done, particularly for a live album, because you look at live albums, Till Hell Freezes Over, the Eagles one, was re-recorded in the studio. So many things were redone on it.
Yeah.
There's nothing redone on this. I just sent it to Clive and said, "Clive, it's been a long time since we saw each other. I'm not looking for a record deal. I'm beyond that now. I just wanted to let you know that I'm still alive. I'm still making music, and here's my latest album that I just did." So I'm hoping I'll get a reply from him, but if I don't, it doesn't matter. But I just wanted to tell him how much I really admired him.
Amazing.
And he went on from there with Bruce Springsteen,
Of course.
Simon Garfunkel, and just Whitney Houston. It was just never ending.
Wow, amazing. So at this time when you had seen him and the other record company, you are playing guitar, you're writing your own material, and you're singing. You're kind of a one-man band, right?
That's right, yes.
And then sometime later, so you then come back to Australia, as you said, because your stepfather died, and you formed a band. You formed the Russell Morris Band. Why did that come about?
Yeah, well, he didn't die. He had a bad heart attack.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, survived it. So
I'll just do that bit again. And your stepfather got sick, so you came back again, and then you formed the Russell Morris Band.
Yeah, well, I had to do something. I'd given up brain surgery, so I couldn't go back to that. So I thought, well, we'll give it a go. And I remember, I often talk to Daryl about this, Daryl Braithwaite. I said, I went to see one of your shows, Daryl, and I said, here was a semi-trailer outside with all your equipment. And I came in and the lighting and everything. And I thought, how can you possibly compete with this? I've got to go on the road, probably with a guy with a torch shining on me, and the PA they had. So I had to start again really, really simply. We had a small van. I had 2 dedicated roadies who were absolutely fantastic. The sound guy and a dedicated roadie who went on to become, once the band broke up, because I ended up breaking the band up years later, went on to become really significant in the music business. One is Grant Walsh, who mixed John Farnham all his whole career.
Right.
And the other one was a guy called Brett Allen, who ended up going overseas and working for Mink DeVille, Paul Simon, Bob Dylan, and now he runs this huge rental company in Los Angeles, because he bought, with every penny he earned, he bought rare guitars and rare amps and things like that. So I had really good people. I was lucky enough to select really good people, and my bands were always really good. So we slowly built up, but we couldn't quite have a hit record. We couldn't have that big hit album that allows you to go off the road. So if you can't go off the road, you've got to continually work to keep the boys alive. You've got to pay them wages, because they've got to feed their families.
Yeah. But you were packing out the houses on the road everywhere. Australia hadn't forgotten about Russell Morris at all.
That's right. We did really, really well, but we really needed a new hit. We needed a hit that was going to take the country by storm. We couldn't quite find it. And at the end, the expenses became greater than the money coming in. and I ended up going broke. I lost so much, like lost my house and all that. And the boys, they just had to move on. And it was just really, really hard. So I was at a really difficult position then. And I formed another band, the Rubes. We put that together. No hits either, because big hits buy you money. Money is not important. The important thing about it is it buys you creative selection. So if you've got money and you can pay people and you say, listen, we're going to take ourselves out of the marketplace now, and we're not going to become overexposed. We're going to do what we want, and we can select what we want to do. And that's why big acts stay big, because they only do huge shows. They don't have to work down in every little bar and every little club to keep everyone alive. And if you keep doing that, you overexpose yourself, and then you become like yesterday's slippers. So
but that's not happened. That's not happened. That didn't happen with you, though, did it?
Oh, it does. You go through cycles. Yeah, it happened with the Rubes, then we broke up. And I couldn't get work. I would probably get the most 20 shows a year, because I was all of a sudden really old hat. And none of the songs were being really, like, they were older songs, and there were new things coming along in the 80s and 90s. And I was just like, hang on, no. And we won and people were following everything in the 80s and 90s, and it was the In Excesses and things were coming up. And I was really old hat. So the only thing I could do would be old RSL clubs. So it was, and as an artist like myself and like all my peers, we all dream of having
the next big thing.
The next big thing. Well, not the next big, something that's credible, that people say, yeah, that's really good. I'm going to buy the new stuff, rather than someone coming up and saying, oh, I don't like that new stuff. I just like it. Why don't you write more stuff like the old stuff? And it's like, but I'm not like that anymore. I'm different, so you have to evolve. And music to me is a smorgasbord. I like to try every style possible. I'm not going to sit down and eat chops and peas and potatoes every meal.
Your life, that's right.
I want it to be,
Well, you certainly did that. You then, at that point, you joined your buddies Ronnie Burns and Daryl Cotton, who had been in the band The Zoot, and you went on the road with them. In 2001, Jim Keys from the awesome Australian band Masters Apprentices replaced Ronnie Burns, and you went out on tour with them as well. And you were drawing crowds everywhere you went with them. Then as I read about you, you got a bit of a lift when The Real Thing and Wings of an Eagle, both songs, were featured in the Australian-made movie The Dish, which kind of regurgitated things, didn't it?
Yeah, it gave me a lift because I'd loved The Castle. It was one of my favourite movies. And when they rang me up and said, we're going to put 2 of your songs in our new movie, I was over the moon. And I went to see the premiere of it. Rob Sitch and Jane invited us along and said, come and the opening sequence with The Real Thing blasting out, Molly and I just looked at each other and went, wow. And we just loved it. And I was very flattered. And it's always wonderful to have your songs in a movie. That to me is one of the ultimates.
Yeah. I mean, talking about diversifying yourself, it wasn't long then until you started coming back to your roots and your love for blues music, because the Russell Morris sound changed completely with the release of some new albums that did exceptionally well for you.
Yeah, I think I went on to, I was probably eating Thai food or Italian food then. I'd gone away from the chop. Well, what happened, I had to look at myself. I looked at myself, and I'd been writing songs and I'd done an album which I thought was absolutely fantastic, an album called Jumpstart Diary. It's sunk.
Sorry. Excuse me.
That's awful. I hate having colds.
Your eyes and my cough.
Yeah.
Jumpstart Diary.
Yeah, Jumpstart Diary, which I thought was one of the best albums I've ever done. Sunk without a trace. And I thought people aren't interested. And I'd done another album ages before that called 1,000 Suns. And I couldn't understand why people didn't like it. And I thought, gee, this is weird. I really like it, but never giving up as the way I am. I looked at myself and I thought, oh, what should I do musically? And I looked in the mirror and I thought, you're an old fart now. You know, you can't get up there and sing pop songs. It's not going to work. So I thought, go back to where you started. Go back to what you started playing. Rhythm and blues, Tamla Motown, and blues.
Uh-huh.
So I thought, so I wrote a couple of blues songs and I thought, they're okay, not great. One was called Red Hot Chili Pepper Woman or something. And I thought, no, they sound like crap, homogenized versions of a really good American blues artists. Like I love John Lee Hooker and Howlin' Wolf, and it was like a bad copy of them.
Uh-huh.
I went to Sydney. I was reading the newspaper. Serendipity again, as we said before. I open up the page and here's this photograph that just goes bing and clings onto my face. There was a photo of a guy called Thomas Archer called Shark Jaws, when it was his arrest photo. And I thought, this is incredible. And I started to look at all the police file photos of back in the 1918, things like that. And in those days, you didn't stand up before a height thing, you know, with all the gradients.
Yeah.
You could sit in a chair. Sit in a chair and lounge like this and pose and smile. And this one in particular had the cop who arrested him standing behind him. I thought, this is great. I took it home and my imagination is pretty good. At almost one Sunday afternoon in Melbourne, it was raining and it spoke to me almost. It almost said, tell people I lived, tell people who I was. I want to live again. So I started to write the song. And instead of calling him Shark Jaws, which they called him, I called him Shark Mouth. And I wrote the song, and all of a sudden that neon light in my head went, bing, this is what I should be doing. At my age, I've got to write blues and roots about Australian characters, and Australian characters will suit the blues and roots because blues and roots was around in 1920. Mm-hmm. So you couldn't do it with like a rap style. And you know what I mean? There's lots of styles of music that wouldn't work. Country had already done, the country people had done Australiana to death. And I thought, I'm going to write an album about blues and country. And when I told a couple of people, one of my ex-managers, he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm doing a blues album. He said, why would you do blues? No one buys blues albums. I said, no one buys any of my albums. I said, I wouldn't care. I said, the last two albums have sold nothing. And he said, oh, well, what's it about? And I said, about Australiana. And he said, people hate Australiana. I said, I don't. I love it. I said, I love all the stories. So I'm going to do that. And he looked at me, he said, Russell, I'll never understand you. He said, you seem to spit success in the face. Mm. So I did it. And again, no one wanted it, like the real thing. Not one record company wanted to touch it.
Really?
They figured I was old hat and they didn't want to touch it. Finally, a small label called Ambition with Robert Rigby said, no, I'll go with it. Let's go with it. And it was on the charts for 2 years. It was the biggest selling album I've ever had in my career. And just went platinum, won an ARIA. And yeah, it's funny how record companies sometimes just have no idea.
No, it's a common story, isn't it?
Yeah.
And of course, that was the first of what became a trilogy in Sharkmouth, Van Diemen's Land and Red Dirt, Red Heart, all of which became really popular, which then led you into Black and Blue Heart in 2019.
Yeah, because I'd been eating that food for a while. And I thought, I don't want to overstay my welcome. And there's a lot more food on the table to eat yet. So I did an album with Bernard Fanning and Nick Dadia, who was a wonderful producer who'd produced everybody from Bruce Springsteen to Powderfinger. And we did like a pop rock album. So I decided to just break the mold again and just really get my head reworking again.
You must have felt all those creative juices flowing since Sharkmouth, and you then tasted success again, and you've got ideas going around everywhere, because that then brought you to a collaboration with your old mate Rick Springfield.
Yeah, that was an interesting one, because Rick and I have always been friends. He's an odd man. He lives on the dark side sometimes.
Mm.
And what I did, I'd written this song called Carmelita's Dance, which was about a woman who was a conduit because when we were in America, I used to love Day of the Dead, the festival. I just loved it. So did Rick. We loved the colors and the songs and the gaiety. And I wrote this song, Carmelita's Dance, and I really liked it. And I said to my wife, listen, I'm going to dress up in Day of the Dead makeup and a hat and sing it. You film me. So I sang it, and I said, I'll put it up on YouTube. And she said, what do you put it up on? I said, I'm not going to put it up as myself. I'll just put it up as unknown. She said, well, no one will ever find it. You've got to have something. And I said, oh, Jack Crome. She said, who's that? I said, I don't know. It just came into my head. She said, really? So I put it up as Jack Crome. A friend saw it and sent it to Rick, and Rick contacted me and said, this has blown me away. 2 days later, he sent me a song he'd written in full makeup. And he said, let's do an album together. So that's how we came about doing that album.
And that album did very well for you also, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Yeah, that was around for quite a while in the charts, which was great. Yeah.
14 tracks, Jack Crome and the Darkness Waltz, a great collaboration between two very talented friends indeed, which then brings us up to present time, Russell, and probably the reason that we're chatting too is because you've got a live album out now that you've been recording called The Real Thing, the Symphonic Concert, where you play, I mean, and this must be the highlight of your career to date, because I know that every performer wants to play with a symphony orchestra, and this is you with a 54-piece one.
Yes. As I keep going back to the theme, I've always had a lot of confidence to try anything. And I've always had people who have been champions that have just said to me at the right time. One I remember when I was back in America, I met this unknown young girl, and she came along with Lowell George, who's a slide player from Little Feat, when I was doing an album, and she started singing with me, and I looked at her and I said, wow, your voice is great. And she said, I absolutely love your voice. And I said, are you a lead? Are you a backing singer? And she said, oh, well, I was in a band. I used to love my band. And she said, we had one hit and that was it. We broke up. And I said, oh, what was it? She said, you wouldn't know. You're in Australia. I said, we get a lot of things. She said, oh, it was a band called the Stone Ponies. And I went, Distant Drum? I said, you sang Distant Drum? She said, you know it. And I said, yeah. I said, I love you. I love that song. And she said, well, you should keep going because I love your voice. And all those people encouraged me a lot to do a lot more singing. And way back, the band encouraged me. Now we come this leap forward. The blues album, Jim Keys from the Masters Apprentices. He said, you've got to do it. You've got to do it. He kept pushing me. This one, I'm at a show and we come off stage and one of the guys in the band said, did you see that guy up there sitting there with his arms crossed, not laughing and just staring at us for the whole show? The guy that looked like Clive Palmer. I said, yeah, that's probably because it was him. They went, oh. So I went out to sign CDs, and here he was in the line with 3 CDs he'd bought. And I signed them, and he said, you know, I've always loved your music, blah, blah, blah. You're underrated, all that. And off he went.
Tell us who Clive Palmer is.
Clive Palmer is the mining magnate. What's he got? He's got all the iron ore reserves in the Pilbara and things like that.
Larger than life character here in Australia, for sure.
Yeah, I don't talk politics with him.
It's a good idea.
So that happened. And then 3 months later, I do a show up in Townsville, and the lady says, because I was doing 2 shows in a row, and she said, Clive Palmer's booked 4 tables each night. And wow. So he turns up. So I start sending him up from stage, making fun of him. And I thought, oh, this will probably upset him. He comes back and he said, I thought that was really funny. I love that. He came back the next night and then came back and said, will you come and have lunch with me? Went and had lunch, and he said, I want to put you on stage. He said, you're underrated. No one's given you the shot that you deserve. And he said, you're working in these silly little clubs. He said, it's ridiculous. He said, your fan base is much bigger than you imagine. He said, I want to put you on the Sydney Opera House and Hamer Hall. And I went, all due respect, I said, sometimes I can't sell out a 500-seater. There's no way. And I said, if I did that and we only sold like 1,000 seats, I'd have to give 1,000 tickets away and I'd make myself looking like an idiot because everyone would find out. And he said, no, he said, you're underselling yourself. He said, you've got to do it. And I said, no, I don't think I will. They contacted me again and said, have you reconsidered? No, I haven't. And finally, they rang me again and I said, all right, we had another meeting. I said, listen, I'll do it. I said, but this could be really humiliating for me. And I said, if we have to pack, I said, the costs are going to be phenomenal. We've got all the arrangements, 60 musicians, the hire of the halls. I said, Clive, it could cost you a lot of money. And he went, I've got a lot of money. And he said, I love music. And he said, I love your music in particular. He said, I love all music. He said, it makes us human. He said, it's one of our great communicator throughout the world. And he said, I'll prove to you we're wrong. He said, you have no idea that you have an audience that is as big as it is. And I had to admit to him, I said, you were right. I was wrong because I think we sold out Hamer Hall in 3 days the first time. Now we've got 2 shows, which look like both selling out in Hamer Hall.
That's Melbourne's largest concert hall.
Yep. We're going back on sale in Sydney at the Opera House and Brisbane at the Entertainment Centre, Adelaide and Perth. And the great thing about Clive, you'd think he'd want to be there with his hands on everything. After the 2 shows, he said, that's my present to you. That's my gift. You own all of it. You own the arrangements. You own the show. You own the video. And he said, that's just my small gift to you.
Wow.
Really incredible, yeah.
That changes my opinion of Clive Palmer.
Yeah, it was very, very kind, yeah.
Amazing. So how does it feel for you to be up there with a 54-piece orchestra?
Feels like you're strapped to the front of an express train. It's unbelievable. It's an incredible feeling. The power of it, although I don't get the full power, I did during rehearsals because I took my earbuds out because you've got to hear yourself and hear the orchestra. But the power of it was just phenomenal, and the audiences were it's just great to see the reaction with the audiences. It is phenomenal, and the star of the show is David Hirschfelder
because he's done the arrangements.
His arrangements are out of this world. The overture, the way the show starts, is like, oh my God. And people go, what is coming now? What's coming next? Because it just goes boom, straight, dumps it right on your head. And it's and the orchestra and the band, I'm the driver of the Ferrari, but without the Ferrari, I wouldn't have been able to drive. And they've just delivered me a beautiful car. And the producer who put the show on, Phil Bathels, and all the people he hired run like a Swiss watch. Just fantastic.
Incredible. And you're playing a selection of all your material, aren't you? New and old.
New and old. And the good part about it is they had a stage director and he said, what songs do you want to play? And I said, how can I pick the songs? It's like lining your kids up and saying, who's your favorite child? I said, I can't do it. I said, it's like looking in the mirror with your nose pressed up against the glass. I can't see the full picture. And I said, you pick the songs. And he went and picked the songs, and I was absolutely shocked at some of the songs he picked. Some, like 4 completely unknown songs to the public because the public haven't heard them played on radio ad nauseum.
For example?
A song called As Far As I Remember, another song called Blown Away, another song called Dance With Me Now, Thousand Suns, that's 5, is it, or 4 or 5? And then there's one more, I Will Wait For You. All these songs, and they go over so well. And I said, why did you pick those songs? And he said, because they're fabulous. He said, people should hear them. And I think it's given the album a great balance because you've got all these ones that people have heard ad nauseum and these ones that are a breath of fresh air. And a lot of people have gone, I never realised how good that song really was.
Right. And
So
we'll have a listen. Russell Morris, is there one song from your entire repertoire that you enjoy singing most?
1,000 tons.
And why?
The way it builds and what it's about. It's about, I read a book called One Crowded Hour, about Neil Davis, the Australian war photographer, and his experiences during Vietnam and all the war zones he went to. There was one underlying thing that, and I tried to imagine being in a little village. Your grandparents, their grandparents had lived there, and you're there, and you've got a happy family, and you've got a subsistence living, whether you're living on rice and you're growing your own crops, or in the Middle East, you've got goats and things like that. All of a sudden, a guerrilla army comes in and says, listen, you're our fellow countrymen, you've got to stick by us. If you support the government troops, you're gone. So 2 weeks later, the government troops come in and say, you support the guerrillas and you're dead. Something happens, someone gets caught, so they start to kill a few people in the village, either the government troops or the guerrillas. And all of a sudden, you're a refugee. You're going, I'm not staying here, let's go. And you take all your belongings and you run. And you hope. Some of them went into the hills and hid in the hills hoping they could come back. Others went to other countries. But the dream in the heart of all of those people, all those refugees, is to return to what they know. Everyone wants to return to their own home. I love going back to Richmond and walking around the streets in Richmond, where I grew up, just as something that's the soul. And that song is about that dreaming of wanting to go back and take back what is yours. And the way the song builds with its intensity is, I just love the way everything falls into place.
Oh, fabulous. Fabulous. Is there anything left on your bucket list, or with this live album now, do you feel pretty complete?
I usually, when I've finished an album, it's like I've got a blank slate as a brain.
Right.
And I think that's it. I can't do any more. That's it. And all of a sudden, like the little boy with the finger in the dike, who's picking a little bit away and a little dribble of water comes out, starts to come out. And so if I all of a sudden sit down and write 2 songs, which will probably be horrible, that's enough to dislodge the dam. And then it starts coming. But I just need to find a couple of things that'll inspire me. And you can't, people say, oh, you've just got to wait for it to come, but you can force it. You can sit down and say, right, and read another book, read another book, open your mind up a bit more, and all of a sudden it just goes, and out they come.
Fantastic. Well, we're loving this. We've loved your entire career and can't wait to see what next flows from Russell Morris. Thank you so much for your time today. You've been super generous. It's been wonderful.